Before you lies one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, a land where bronze was forged when Rome did not yet exist, where Christianity was embraced 6 centuries before the baptism of Russia, where a unique alphabet was created that endures to this very day. This is Armenia, a nation that rose again and again after catastrophe, conquest, and genocide. For 3,000 years, empires have tried to erase this people from the map. None succeeded. Over the next 25 minutes, we will journey from the prehistoric settlements of the Ararat Valley to the vibrant streets of modern Yerevan, from ancient Urartu to the digital age. This is the entire history of Armenia. The Armenian highlands rise like a fortress at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Crowned by the twin peaks of Mount Ararat, the sacred mountain that has watched over this land since before human memory. Already in the 4th millennium before our era, people here were smelting copper and bronze, cultivating wheat, and pressing grapes into wine. Deep inside the Areni cave, archaeologists made a stunning discovery. The oldest known leather shoe in the world, more than 5,500 years old. Nearby, they found the world's oldest winery, clay vats still stained with grape residue, evidence that Armenian winemaking predates the Egyptian pyramids by centuries. These highlands were not just a crossroads of ancient trade, they were a crucible of human innovation. But the first great state to emerge on this land was the Kingdom of Urartu. In the 9th century before our era, Urartian kings erected fortresses on cliff tops, carved canals through solid rock, and dared to challenge the mightiest power of the ancient world, Assyria. Urartu was no mere highland stronghold. At its zenith, it rivaled Assyria as the dominant force of the Near East. Its warrior kings, Menua, Argishti, Sarduri, left inscriptions in cuneiform carved deep into living rock, proclaiming their victories and their monumental building projects across a vast domain stretching from the shores of Lake Van to Lake Sevan and the fertile valleys beyond. They built roads, dammed rivers, and created an empire of stone and water. In 782 BC, King Argishti I founded the fortress of Erebuni, on the very hilltop where Yerevan stands today. This makes the Armenian capital one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, 29 years older than Rome itself. The founding inscription survives to this day, carved in stone. By the greatness of the god Kaldi, Argishti, son of Menua, built this mighty fortress and called it Erebuni. The fortress was vast, a royal palace, granaries, temples to the god Kaldi, and barracks for a garrison of thousands. From a military outpost on a dusty hilltop, a city would grow that would witness 3,000 years of unbroken human history. Urartu was renowned above all for its mastery of water. The Urartian kings built irrigation canals stretching dozens of kilometers through mountainous terrain, engineering marvels that turned arid hillsides into fertile farmland. The Menua Canal, constructed in the 8th century BC, supplied water to the region for nearly 3,000 years. Some sections remained functional well into the 20th century. They forged weapons and armor of exceptional quality. Urartian bronze helmets, shields, and quivers, decorated with elaborate scenes of warfare and hunting, have been found across the ancient world, testament to both the artistry and the military prowess of this highland civilization. But by the 6th century BC, the kingdom that had defied Assyria could not withstand the storm gathering from the east. The Medes and the Scythians descended upon the highlands. Cities burned. Great fortresses crumbled. The fires of Urartu's final destruction were so intense that archaeologists can still trace the scorch marks on the stones of Teishabaini. And yet, from the ashes of Urartu, a new nation emerged, forged from Urartian, Hurrian, and Indo-European peoples. A nation that would carry the memory of these ancient builders into a new age, the nation we know as the Armenians. After the fall of Urartu, Armenia became part of the vast Achaemenid Persian Empire, governed as a satrapy, but never fully subdued. The Armenian nobility endured, their traditions intact. The Orontid dynasty ruled as vassal kings, maintaining local customs and authority beneath the Persian umbrella. On the magnificent stone reliefs of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian kings, we can see Armenian tribute bearers, men in distinctive robes carrying ornate metal vessels and leading prized horses up the grand staircase to the throne of the King of Kings, a sign of both respect and dependence, but also of a people whose identity not even the world's greatest empire could erase. When Alexander the Great shattered the Persian Empire, the political map of the ancient world was redrawn overnight. Armenia seized its chance. In 189 BC, Artaxerxes I founded a new dynasty, the Artaxiads, and united the fragmented Armenian lands into a single powerful kingdom. He built a splendid new capital, Artashat, on the banks of the Araxes River, at the convergence of major trade routes. According to legend, the great Carthaginian general Hannibal himself, then a fugitive from Rome, advised Artaxerxes on the city's design. Whether truth or myth, Artashat flourished. It became a cosmopolitan center where caravans from Rome, Persia, India, and China converged at the crossroads of the ancient Silk Road. The true golden age arrived under Tigran II, known to history simply as Tigran the Great. Through a combination of military genius and shrewd diplomacy, Tigranes built an empire that stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus Mountains to the borders of Egypt. By 69 BC, Armenia had become the third largest state on the planet, surpassed only by Rome and Parthia. But Tigranes was more than a conqueror. He was a builder and a patron of Hellenistic culture. He constructed a magnificent new capital, Tigranakert, adorned with Greek-style theaters and temples, attracting philosophers, poets, and artists from across the civilized world. The city was a jewel of the ancient East, where Armenian, Greek, and Persian traditions blended into something extraordinary. But such power inevitably attracted the gaze of Rome. The legions of Lucullus marched through the mountain passes of Armenia. Though Tigranes fought with courage and tactical brilliance, the relentless machinery of Rome was too much. He preserved his throne, but was forced to surrender his conquered territories. The golden age of Armenian Empire was over, yet the impact of Tigranes endured far beyond his reign. The memory of his great kingdom became the foundation of Armenian national identity for millennia to come. Even today, his image adorns Armenian currency. His name is whispered with pride, a symbol of what this small nation once achieved and what it still aspires to become. In the year 301 AD, an event occurred that would transform Armenia forever. Gregory, a Christian preacher of noble Armenian birth, had been imprisoned for 13 years in the deep underground pit of Khor Virap by order of King Tigran III. 13 years in utter darkness, surrounded by snakes and filth. According to tradition, he survived only because a pious woman secretly lowered bread to him each day. When the king fell gravely ill, tormented, the legends say, by madness, a vision revealed that only Gregory could heal him. The prisoner was pulled from his pit, emaciated but unbroken. He healed the king, and Armenia became the first nation in history to officially adopt Christianity as its state religion, 12 years before Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan. In the year 301 AD, an event occurred that would transform Armenia forever. Gregory, a Christian preacher of noble Armenian birth, had been imprisoned for 13 years in the deep underground pit of Khor Virap by order of King Tigran III. 13 years in utter darkness, surrounded by snakes and filth. According to tradition, he survived only because a pious woman secretly lowered bread to him each day. When the king fell gravely ill, tormented, the legends say, by madness, a vision revealed that only Gregory could heal him. The prisoner was pulled from his pit, emaciated but unbroken. He healed the king, and Armenia became the first nation in history to officially adopt Christianity as its state religion, 12 years before Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan. In 451, on the dusty plain of Avarayr, Armenians made a stand that would echo through eternity. The Sassanid Persian Empire demanded that Armenia renounce Christianity and return to the old Zoroastrian faith. The answer was war. Commander Vardan Mamikonian rallied his outnumbered forces. They knew they would likely die. They charged anyway. Vardan fell on the battlefield. The Armenian army was defeated. But the Persians were so stunned by the ferocity of Armenian resistance and by their own devastating losses that they ultimately relented. Armenia kept its Christian faith. Avarayr became the spiritual heart of Armenian identity, the belief that some things are worth dying for, and that a people can win a spiritual victory even in the ashes of military defeat. After the fall of the Arsacid dynasty, Armenia spent centuries as a battlefield between the Byzantine and Persian empires. Kingdoms rose and fell, borders shifted with every war. But Armenian culture refused to die. It retreated into monasteries perched on cliff edges and hidden in remote valleys, places like Tatev, Hagpat, and Sanahin. There, monks labored in scriptoriums, copying manuscripts by candlelight, preserving the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Armenian architecture evolved its own unmistakable style. Stone churches crowned with elegant conical domes, their facades alive with intricate carvings. And the Kachkar, the Armenian cross stone, became one of the most unique art forms in human history. Each one hand-carved, no two alike among the tens of thousands that survive. In 885, Ashat I of the Bagratuni dynasty restored Armenian statehood. Over the next century, the kingdom grew in power and prestige, and its capital, Ani, became one of the wonders of the medieval world. By the 11th century, more than 100,000 people lived within Ani's massive double walls. Travelers called it the City of 1,001 Churches. Sitting astride the Silk Road, its wealth was legendary. Merchants from Baghdad, Constantinople, and the distant East filled its bazaars with silk, spices, and precious stones. Armenian architects pushed the boundaries of what stone could do. The Cathedral of Ani, completed in 1010 AD, featured pointed arches and structural techniques that would not appear in European Gothic architecture for another 100 years. But in 1064, the Seljuk Turks descended upon Ani. The city's defenders fought desperately from the walls, but treachery opened a gate. The Seljuks poured in. The massacre that followed was recorded with horror by chroniclers across the medieval world. The Armenian state on its historic homeland ceased to exist. But the fall of Ani was not the end of Armenian civilization. It was its dispersal. Armenian communities spread to Crimea, to Poland, to India, to Ethiopia, to the merchant cities of Europe. Wherever they went, they built churches, founded schools, established printing presses. The Armenian genius for survival, honed over millennia, was about to face its greatest tests. Tens of thousands of Armenians fled south, over treacherous mountain passes, through hostile territories, carrying their children, their manuscripts, their sacred relics. They walked for weeks, across snowbound peaks and sun-scorched valleys toward the warm coast of the Mediterranean. Many perished on the journey, but those who survived carried something more precious than gold, the unbroken thread of Armenian civilization. And in Cilicia, a fertile region in what is now southern Turkey, nestled between the Taurus Mountains and the sea, far from their ancient homeland, these refugees created something extraordinary. A new Armenian kingdom, reborn on the shores of a new world. Cilician Armenia became a vital bridge between East and West during the Age of the Crusades. Armenian kings forged alliances with the Crusader states, intermarrying with the Lusinian dynasty of Cyprus and the Latin kingdoms of the Levant. The port of Ayas became one of the great trading hubs of the Mediterranean. Marco Polo himself described it as the gateway to the east. In 1198, King Levan I received his royal crown from the Holy Roman Empire, the culmination of decades of brilliant diplomacy. Cilician Armenia produced magnificent illuminated manuscripts, developed its own sophisticated legal code, and maintained trade relations stretching from Venice and Genoa to the courts of the Mongol Khans. But the tides of history were turning against the small Armenian kingdom. The Crusader states crumbled one by one, allies vanished, and in 1375, the Egyptian Mamluks stormed the last Armenian fortress of Sis. King Levan VI was taken prisoner and carried away in chains. The kingdom fell. Armenian statehood vanished from the earth. For 600 long, bitter years, the Armenian people would endure as a nation without a state, scattered across empires and continents, surviving in merchant colonies from Calcutta to Amsterdam. Bound together not by borders, but by their ancient Christian faith, their unique 36-letter alphabet, and the collective undying memory of kingdoms lost. From the 15th century onward, historic Armenia was carved up between two great Islamic empires, the Ottoman Turks to the west and Safavid Persia to the east. The Ararat Valley, the very cradle of Armenian civilization, lay split by an imperial frontier that would endure for centuries. In the Persian east, Shah Abbas I forcibly relocated hundreds of thousands of Armenians to his new capital at Isfahan, creating the famous Julfa quarter, where Armenian merchants became the nerve center of global trade from India to Europe. In the Ottoman West, Armenian peasants tilled the rocky soil of mountain villages, tending flocks and vineyards, baking lavash in clay tonir ovens, and gathering each Sunday in ancient stone churches. Through it all, the Holy See of Etchmiadzin, believed to be the very first cathedral built in the Christian world, remained the spiritual anchor of a dispersed and divided people. In the Ottoman Empire, Armenians carved out a remarkable niche. They were called the Loyal Nation, trusted as bankers, merchants, architects, and court physicians. The Armenian quarter of Constantinople buzzed with enterprise, jewelry workshops, photography studios, printing presses producing newspapers in Armenian, Turkish, and French. But the 19th century brought dangerous change. As Armenian national consciousness awakened, inspired by the Greek and Bulgarian examples, the Ottoman state grew suspicious, then hostile. Sultan Abdul Hamid II unleashed waves of massacres between 1894 and 1896. Hundreds of thousands perished. It was a rehearsal, a harbinger, of the systematic horror that would soon engulf an entire civilization. April 24, 1915. This date is burned into the soul of every Armenian alive. On that night, Ottoman authorities arrested more than 200 Armenian intellectuals, writers, doctors, lawyers, clergymen, and community leaders in Constantinople. Most were deported to the interior and killed within weeks. The head of the nation was severed first. What followed was the first genocide of the 20th century. The Armenian population of the Ottoman Empire, men, women, children, the elderly, was subjected to forced deportation, death marches through the scorching Syrian desert toward Deir ez-Zor, mass executions, deliberate starvation, and forced conversion. Between 1 and 1.5 million people perished. A 3,000-year-old civilization that had flourished across Anatolia was systematically erased from its homeland. But even in the darkest hour, the Armenian spirit refused to break. In May 1918, at the Battle of Sardarapat, Armenian volunteer fighters, many of them genocide survivors armed with little more than farming tools and desperate courage, halted the advancing Ottoman army at the gates of eastern Armenia. It was a miracle born of absolute desperation. On May 28, 1918, the First Republic of Armenia was proclaimed in Yerevan. For the first time in 600 years, Armenians had their own sovereign state. It was tiny, impoverished, overwhelmed with refugees, but it existed. The Armenian tricolor, red for the bloodshed, blue for the skies of Armenia, orange for the courage of its people, flew over Yerevan for the first time. In December 1920, the Red Army crossed into Armenia. The young republic fell. Armenia became a Soviet Socialist republic, absorbed into the vast machinery of the USSR. Over the next 70 years, the transformation was immense. Yerevan grew from a dusty provincial town of 5,000 souls into a modern metropolis of over 1 million. The architect Alexander Tamanian reimagined the capital in pink tuff, the distinctive volcanic stone that gives Yerevan its signature warm glow. Republic Square, the Cascade Stairway, the Opera House, the landmarks that define modern Yerevan were born in the Soviet decades. Armenia became a powerhouse of science. The Burykan Astrophysical Observatory, institutes of physics and mathematics, a world-class chess tradition. Soviet rule brought literacy, industrialization, and urbanization, but also repression, censorship, and the subordination of national identity to communist ideology. December 7, 1988. At 11:41 in the morning, the earth shook for 30 seconds. The Spitak earthquake, magnitude 6.8, killed 25,000 people and left 500,000 homeless. The cities of Spitak and Leninakan were reduced to rubble. Poorly constructed Soviet apartment blocks collapsed like houses of cards, burying families alive. The world responded with an outpouring of aid. But the disaster exposed the rot at the heart of the Soviet system. Even before the earthquake, however, change was already in the air. In February 1988, hundreds of thousands of Armenians had flooded the streets of Yerevan, demanding the reunification of Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenia, the first mass national movement in the entire Soviet Union. The cracks in the Soviet Empire were spreading, and Armenia stood at the leading edge of its collapse. September 21, 1991. In a referendum watched by the world, 99% of Armenians voted for independence. The Soviet Union was disintegrating, and Armenia stepped into freedom. But freedom came at a terrible price. War erupted with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey and Azerbaijan imposed a crushing blockade. The early 1990s became known as the dark and cold years, when electricity vanished for months at a time, factories fell silent, and desperate families cut down the trees lining Yerevan's boulevards for firewood. Hyperinflation, mass emigration, poverty, the new nation teetered on the brink. And yet, through it all, the foundations of an independent state were being built. Today, Armenia is a land of profound contrasts and fierce aspirations. Yerevan has reinvented itself as a vibrant technology hub, its IT sector one of the fastest growing in the post-Soviet world. Startups and coding boot camps share streets with ancient churches and Soviet-era monuments. The Armenian diaspora, 15 million strong, spread across 6 continents, remains one of the most influential expatriate communities on Earth. Mount Ararat stands on the horizon, visible every single day from the rooftops of Yerevan, majestic and snow-capped, yet across the border in Turkey, a symbol of loss, of longing, and of unfinished history. 3,000 years of civilization, dozens of empires, a genocide that killed 1.5 million souls, earthquakes, wars, blockades, and still, a people who are here, who create, who remember, who endure. This is Armenia,